passa på att nämna att imorgon, söndag klockan 12:20 så har vi en liten programändring. Åsa Linderborg utgår och det blir istället satirmagasinet Charlie Hebdo som det kommer att handla om. Nu välkomnar vi Jordens Vänner, rubriken i Mozambique, Kampen om marken, och Sofie Persson från Jordens Vänner ska få presentera programmet. Välkomna!
Ja, tack så jättemycket. Ja, jag kommer som sagt från Jordens Vänner Sverige, eller Friends of the Earth Sweden som det också kallas. Och vi är en miljö- och solidaritetsorganisation som jobbar med frågor både i Sverige och internationellt. Idag så pratar vi ganska mycket om landgrabbing, vilket är ett problem som vi ser internationellt idag, där investerare kommer till fattigare länder och köper upp marken för att människorna som bor där sedan behöver flytta på sig utan att de har blivit tillfrågade. Helt enkelt. Och det är därför vi säljer svenska kommuner här idag i våran monter. För att berätta mer om detta så har vi en internationell gäst som heter Daniel Ribeiro från Jordens Vänner Mozambique. Han kommer prata mer om detta senare. Och för att moderera detta samtalet så kommer Bosse Johansson, våran regnskogsexpert, tala mer om detta. Så jag välkomnar dem. Tack så mycket.
Vi glömde att säga att det är på engelska, den här tillställningen. Men portugisiska går bra också. Vilket väljer ni? Hand upp. In English, no?
Please.
In English, yes. I would like to know a little bit about the land grabbing situation in Mozambique in general before we dig a little bit deeper into it, if you could...
Well, as you can imagine, there's throughout the whole of Africa, there's been a big push for land, and this also happens even more intensely when there's a global economic slowdown or crisis. So a way to get out of it is to go for resources and land in Africa to create more capital. So at this moment, there's a lot of land grab going on, and Mozambique is one of the focus points in Africa for many reasons. Mozambique is got 80% of the Mozambique's population is subsistence farmers. These farmers produce 90% of what we consume, so we have a very rural-based population. So they see that, unfortunately, as unexplored territory, something that they can come in and take, because communities have less power to protect themselves. So that's why Mozambique is such a big focus. And it's not because of the land law. We actually have one of the strongest land laws in Africa. We recognize community rights. We recognize communal rights, which is not usual, because and they don't need to have any paperwork to prove it. If they are from that land, if they are indigenous to that area, it is their land. And they have to be consulted, and they have to give consent before they move out, before anyone can move in and do anything in the land. So the problem isn't the law. The problem is going from paper to reality. That's where the gap lies.
What is interesting to us is to hear that there's still like 80% small farmers in the country, and that they produce like 90% of the food consumed, because we had a debate here in Sweden that we are not anymore self-sufficient, and maybe we never was. But anyway, from that, we discussed the other day an example of modern land grabbing with in this case, Brazil and Japan involved. Could you explain a little bit more about that?
So what we're noticing a lot is that it's getting more and more globalized, and more partners are getting involved in it. Now, especially with the new emerging economies, such as Brazil, China, India, they're new players as well. So it's getting, and the kind of partnerships that are forming are very interesting but scary at the same time. One of the largest land grabs in Africa is occurring in Mozambique. The project is called Pro Savannah, which is based on a project that occurred 20, 30 years ago in Brazil, called Pro-Sarad, which is what caused the landless movement in Brazil. But Mozambique sees this investment as a way of going from subsistence-based farming to industrial, large-scale farming. So they're giving away 140,000 square kilometers. Just to put that into an easier concept, it's the size, basically it's a third of Sweden in terms of size. So it's a huge, huge land grab. And this was done between the governments. There was no public consultation, farmers weren't informed. We have 4 million farmers living in this area that are threatened by this project. And why these 3 countries? Well, Japan benefits from selling chemicals for the large-scale agro-industry and equipment. But also, they need soy and other produces for their markets, especially for feed, for the animal feed, and for food security in that side. So they are supplying equipment and receiving the product. Brazil, on the other hand, sees it as an expansion of their large-scale agro-industry. They see it as having very good skill set with soy especially. There's that language connection. We both speak Portuguese. And it's a way of expanding the agro-industry. And Mozambique, unfortunately, does not value the fact that we producing 90% of our food, what we eat, meaning that we're so close to getting food sovereignty. However, they don't see that value. Instead, they see subsistence-based farming as the old way of doing it, and they want to get back into the modern. They think the term is in modernizing our agriculture, getting to the 21st century with agriculture. But that basically just means large-scale monoculture, and that's what they want, at the cost of making a lot of farmers without land. And farmers without land basically is basically poverty. That's their livelihoods. That's what they depend on. We do not have any strong industries. We're a very poor country, so there's no labor market to absorb this huge amount of people that will become landless. And that's the big concern. But the focus only is we can make a lot of money giving this land to Brazil and getting investment.
I remember also that you said something about infrastructure. That is one of the things they point out, that there will be infrastructure works in the area where they are taking place. In this case, like 1/3 of Sweden. That's a lot of land. But you told me that there is already infrastructure there.
So the subsistence farmers do have struggles. One of the struggles is links to markets, because we have very few roads, very few railways. So there's a lot of product is being produced in areas that aren't linked and can't get these produces out to the markets. So there is need of infrastructure. But this need has been falsely used to promote the project. Why? There's about only 3 functional railway lines in Mozambique. One of them is in the Nacala corridor. It also has a major road to the ports. And so these communities, coincidentally, are actually one of the few big areas that are linked to the markets. They do have the infrastructure. But that's why they're choosing this area, because it decreases the investment. Mozambique is trying to make this investment attractive to Brazilian farmers. And Brazilian farmers don't want to go there and still have to build roads, railways, and all that. This area they've chosen is one of the most fertile and one of the most with the best infrastructure. So even though they're using this narrative, it's not true. It's just trying to make this look good for who doesn't look into the details. And that's the problem, because infrastructure is not going to be built. It's not part of the project. If you read their strategic plan and all that, there is no roads, no railways, no any major infrastructure. They're going to be using and occupying already existing infrastructure that was being used by the local farmers.
Again, about this food production in small scale, small farmers producing food for families and the neighborhood. What happens when there is only like soy grown in this extent area? The local people, what will they eat? We don't eat soy, no?
So if we look at other African countries that are further down, Mozambique, we had civil war until the early 90s. So that's why we have such a strong and large rural-based population. But our neighboring countries have been going through this process and started much sooner. And what we notice there is food security and dependency on food aid. Because if they're not producing food, somebody has to give food. And that's one of the big trends that happens. Another thing that the project's trying to do is they actually want more than 14 million hectares. So what they want to do is convince other farmers in the area to outgrow for them, in the sense that they'll supply seeds and fertilizers, put it on credit, and then when they buy the produce, they get the balance zero, and the surplus goes into money. The problem is the same projects have been happening in other areas in Africa and in south of Mozambique. And what usually happens, it goes well while the markets are good. When there's a market crash, communities get into debt, and then once they get into heavy debt, their land's taken away because they owe, and then they lose land. You see, so even the people not directly affected by the project, the outgrowers also are at risk. So at this moment, it's a one-dimensional focus on large-scale agriculture, and the government is really not worried about what's going to happen to the local farmers. But the local farmers have been saying no. The project already is 2 years delayed, if not more. They're now considering decreasing it to 7 million hectares, which is 70,000 square kilometers, because of this resistance from the farmers. And so the farmers and the NGOs and movements are getting all together to fight this. And there's been some small victories, and that we're hoping that we can start changing, or at least stopping this project.
Well, did you mention the paper of the Japanese in this project? What's their contribution, really?
So JICA, which is the Japanese development agent, is promoting this as a development project. So we've been working. The good thing about we belong to Friends of the Earth Mozambique. Our partners here are Friends of the Earth Sweden. We're working with Friends of the Earth Japan and Friends of the Earth Brazil. And we've been trying to so we actually have been in Japan with our friends, and we went to Parliament and we raised these issues. So now JICA is going to review the project in more detail, and they've put a pause on the funds. So if we can stop the funds from the Japan Development Agency, because this is not going to develop anything, that's one way of slowing down or even stopping it. But the nice thing that's the thing with the globalized system we have, it's important to have these social networks like Friends of the Earth, which is the largest grassroots federation globally. And we have partners around the world, and that's what we're trying to do. Link up all of our struggles, because now we're getting more and more these multiple players, and it's hard for a group like us in Mozambique with the farmers to deal with it. And that's why we're starting, these linking ups have been very good at getting us more strength and the ability to force these projects to listen to our concerns. But I know that there's a lot of bad news, so I think I should give some good news as well. The same way as a lot of the globalized system is bringing these complex projects in, we also have more access to solutions. And the same way as Brazil is helping, the Brazilian private sector is causing us problem. Our friends from Brazil, for example, the farmers from Brazil are showing us solutions because they went through this. So we are now starting to have projects where it is community ownership of land, in which you have traditional practices and other activities that are far more imbalanced with the local environment, and that help develop the communities directly. An example of that is the largest rainforest in southern Africa is in Mozambique, and it's called Mabu. It's also called the Google forest because Google found this green block and sent some scientists, and they found 27-something new species of snake and butterflies, but it's called the Mabu forest. But if you want to search it, it helps. But this forest is got 4 communities living on the outskirts, and they have the traditional right to the forest. But there was this threat from the commercial interests. So what we have been working with them is trying to get the commercial land right. So it's a community conservation project. And we managed to get the provincial approval, and now it's at national level. So if we manage to succeed, we'll have the largest rainforest in community ownership, doing community-based traditional activities and local economies. So they'll be developing the area in their way, and they'll be benefit directly from these projects. And we're getting a lot of good experiences from similar indigenous communities in Brazil that have managed to do this. And there's been a lot of good exchange. So the same way as this globalized system is causing more threats, it's also the solutions. We have the whole world to look into and find and get help from. So and we also have a few other projects now popping up with a similar nature.
Exactly. Friends of the Earth here in Sweden, we are supporting, like we say, rainforest cooperations in the Amazon, in Brazil, in the far west, really, and close to the border to Bolivia. And that is basically with the indigenous people. And there is basically also to protect their territories. Because even in Brazil, it's a lot of exploitation in the Amazon. So when you read in the papers that the Amazon is safe, don't believe them. It's just statistics. And as we know, you can use statistics the way you want to. What is interesting with these Brazilian projects is also that let's say, compared with the land grabbing issue in Mozambique, in Brazil is still very huge territories. So there is a reason for hope if the politics goes in the right direction. In this very moment, unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be so. Because in the Brazilian Congress, there is a majority always say yes for exploitation. That means also that they put proposals, motioner, in the Congress, which always is like diminishing the Indian territories, or open up for mining or for logging and these kind of activities. There is a word, say, in Brazil about these Indian territories that says muito terra para pouco índio. It's a lot of land for very few Indian. But they never use the same expression for these extant landlords who have occupied big areas of land. So, in the future, we hope to cooperate also with Friends of the Earth in Mozambique, because actually the issues are very similar. The problems are very similar, and the solutions are probably more or less the same ones. Daniel has also been a board member of Friends of the Earth International, and I think finally you can say something about this international network and the future. Huh?
So, Friends of the Earth International represents over 70 countries. So in every country we have a grassroots organization, and we get together to make global campaigns, because some of these issues are global. So, and one of them, land grab, is central to that, and protecting forests and indigenous community rights. And we have quite a lot of information on our site, and we have other campaigns, global campaigns, is climate change and dirty energy. And I think it'd be good if people could have a look and see, because there's lots of ways to contribute. And in not only there's a lot of activities, and also this year the COP is going to be in Paris, which is not too far away, and there's a lot of joint activities that we can look into. Thanks.
Thanks, Daniel. And And well, I think we finish here. I do like the football players, you know, when they show their mark, Friends of the Earth, Jordens, Vänner, and then they do. Okay.